Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Hope you had a great holiday, whether it be spending your time with family, or hanging out with friends, or you're just like me and you're looking at cat memes. So, anyway, Eternal's Transcendence priority lists. Disclaimer: Eternal's priority list is very complex, and the tier list probably depends on your situation, and arguably what guild war is coming up next. So in this video, I'm just gonna lay out Eternals based on their overall strength that they have at different phases of Transcendence, and the marginal difference that they get at different phases. To emphasize that this tier list is not always correct and it depends on your situation, I will give an example. So if Earth Guild War is next week when you're watching this video, then obviously Octo and Sarasa will take priority over stronger Eternals like Six or Neon. Okay, so we're gonna be rating them into 3 different tier lists, which consists of their freshly ULB form, which is 110, and then 130, and lastly 150. We need to do this because Eternals are really complex. There's Eternals that are on D tier on 110, but A tier on 150. So it's like different levels of return on investments fluctuates a lot throughout the Eternals. And before rating them, I want to tell you my thought process on rating the Eternals. Like I just said, I will be rating them on 3 different phases if you could call it that. So, the way I'm gonna be rating them is, I will not only take into account the overall unit strength that they are at that phase, but also the marginal upgrades that the unit gets compared to previous forms. So with that out of the way, starting at 110. So, if you can afford it, you would 110 of the Eternals eventually anyway. But on this tier, I'm only gonna mention Eternals that benefits a lot from the 110 upgrade. Like for example, Sarasa's 130 is one of the core units for Earth, but since she doesn't benefit a lot from the 110 upgrade, I won't be mentioning her. Okay, so starting off with 6. 6 is pretty self-explanatory. Damage cap EMP, gain 2 stacks when OGing, his upgrade from 100 to 110. It's not the biggest, but then again, he's the most universal unit in Dark, so I have to put him in S tier. And next up is Octo. Octo is probably the Eternals that get the most significant upgrade at 110. He gets 110 EMP and also a bunch of stuff on OG. Even though he's not as universal as 6, he's pretty much used in most content that you do with Earth. You could use him on FA, you do hard content with him, you could use him for EX plus OTK and Nightmare 200 in Guild War to a certain extent. Below 6 and Octo, the tier list is pretty janky and you could easily put any unit on the list a tier higher or lower depending on how you value each element's respective Eternals or what content you value more. So on top of A tier we have Song. Song at 110 is actually pretty good. On OG she refreshes her skill tree and also double cast when using it. Song also gives you the option to do OG OTK. Next up we have Fiower. He's a good unit on FA on 110. He gains value for hard content that need higher hit counts, such as Viking Mugen setups and fast solos. After that we have Siete. Siete is okay. At 110 he's very decent because he's very versatile for almost any raid set you're doing with Wind. After that we have 110 Uno. Uno gets an OK upgrade. He's one of the core units for Nightmare 95 as well as OTK in Guild War. If you're desperate for an FA char, then he fits decently, I guess. Then for B tier, we have Tian. Tian's uses for 110 is really just for OTK. And for the rest, like Sarasa, she's a good unit at 130, but I would not recommend her if you don't have resources to get her to 130. Okay, so next up we have the 130 tier list. 130 is the first time gated uncap. Some of the Eternals that doesn't show up on the 110 tier list shines here. Okay, so moving on to S tier, we have 6, which is again pretty self-explanatory. If his passive is on 6 stacks, when you press skill 2, he will get double strike, which is pretty useful. Then we have Neon. Neon's skill tree does a lot of shit at 130. Great for FA, very solid for manual burst setups, and decent for OG OTK. What else can I say? Okay, so moving on to A tier. This tier is really awkward since there aren't any Eternals that get a huge upgrades at 130, so even though it's A tier, the characters that are listed here doesn't really get that much of an upgrade. On top of A tier, we have Octo. His upgrade is just okay. He gets a 30% special OG cap on skill 1. It's just okay, I guess. Xian went from being really shit to okay. Her skill 1 is now multi-hit, and it's on cocaine now, and that's about it. Oh, and she's pretty good for FA and 130. Next up on the tier list is Sarasa. 130 is where Sarasa really shines. She's really strong in 130 because she gets triple strike when her HP is below 25%, and you use her third skill. She's great for Guild War, also great for FA. She's also great for OG OTK. The only reason why she's not higher on the tier list is because there are simply just better units that just does her job better than her. Units that aren't mentioned here means they are either recommended to set at level 120 or not worth it until they get their 150 amp. So moving on to 150 upgrades. I will rank off the Eternals here unlike the last two tier lists. Okay, so starting off at S tier. Units that are mentioned here in this tier are insane. What they bring to the element, their versatility, and overall just some of the best units in the game. So first, we have 6. Again, 6 gets a massive amp at 150. It gives him Dauntless Pack members and it's just extra damage. It's very useful in a lot of situations such as 0 button 1 chain EX plus OTK, and that's just one example. Then we have Neon. Neon on 150 is just more damage. Who can say no to more damage? She's almost a universal unit in which she's cracked for Guild War, FA, some HL, even certain OTK setups. Moving on to A tier. Again, below S tier, it gets really iffy. Depending on what content you value more or what element you have built, any character could be a tier higher or lower in this tier. In this tier, units are either very versatile or not really that versatile but really good at what they're doing. So on top of A tier, we have Octo. I think it's no surprise that Octo is top of A tier. On 150, he gets a massive upgrade. Octo is just very cracked on almost all the raids that you use Earth on. So next up, we have Feower. You might be wondering why he's here. It is true that his uses is very limited. Some of them are being a decent placeholder if you don't have a better water FA unit and soloing hard content. But he does have a use that in my opinion puts him on A tier. He is, as far as I know, used in the fastest Nightmare 200 skill to comp. As I said before, he could be a tier lower, it all really depends. And then we get to B tier. In this tier, we have units that are just okay. It's like the tier where you could spend your paper on them and not feel too bad about it. So on top of B tier, we have Acer. Acer on 150 is a pretty good unit. She's good in hard content, good in FA, also pretty good for skill match comps in Guild War. She does have a lot of side grades character on some niche content like Medu or Nemone, but she's still solid overall. Then moving on to C tier, this is where it gets pretty bad. You will feel bad spending paper on these units. On top of C tier, we have Sarasa. She's actually not that bad as far as I know. She's used in the fastest 150 full auto setup. She's also pretty decent for OTK and pretty good for short FA fights. Then slightly below her, we have Uno. There isn't really a situation where Uno is really needed. The only Uno setup I could find was 26 seconds, but there are faster comps. He's a decent option for both OG and auto OTKs. I guess an okay unit for FA as well. Then below him, we have Siete. Honestly, 150 Siete is just not worth the trouble. He's good for soloing stuff and flexing on hard rates and maybe like for slow hard content rooms. He's decent for FA and also gives you the option to OG OTK. Then we have D tier, just don't. Do I even need to explain?